So, okay, the next part we're going to talk about is insight and advice for undergrad students and international students. So, think about the best grad students you have had, and then what qualities do they share that separate them from other grad students?
Yeah, I think the best grad students I've had were the ones who were probably the most careful. They were not the ones who were interested in getting the most publications out. They were very thoughtful and careful in their research, in their analysis, in their what I would say theoretical framework, who were perhaps most self-critical also in terms of doing that. So they may have been people who have taken a longer time to publish their first paper, but they were very methodical and careful. So that's one aspect of that. The second part, which I think, and I can think of several undergraduate and graduate students who were probably head and shoulders above everybody else, were people who were broadly read. So people who read outside of their areas and used some of that understanding, whether that was outside of their own area of research and within BME, or even outside BME, and use that to inform their ideas and approaches, right? I tell my students that my goal for them when they start their research is to be on the journey with them, right? So I want to learn also. I don't want to be somebody who is prescribing, do these 5 experiments and that's it, but rather learn from them as well as they sort of develop their ideas and we do it collectively. And I want students who are able to do that, who are self-motivated, but also are able to read broadly and sort of really reflect on that.
You already mentioned some essential mindsets, self-motivated, and then discipline, and also be careful, think about methodology, read about broadly. What other habits or skill sets we need to acquire in grad school, and then as an undergrad and grad student, how to acquire them?
Grad school is hard. It's long. It's things don't always work out in terms of experiments or your research. People have financial considerations. People have family considerations. So I think it's important for people to make sure that they are paying attention to their own mental and physical well-being. I think that's absolutely essential, both as undergrad and grad. That doesn't mean that they don't take their work seriously, not at all. That just means that they're able to prioritize their own mental, physical, or an emotional health. And part of that is to be in an environment that enables them to do that. If they're in an environment where they're always feeling under a microscope, or they're always feeling underappreciated, or they're always feeling anxious, or feel that they're always underperforming, then that's not a very healthy environment. I'm not saying that every person should be in this lab or in that lab. Everybody is different, but find a place where you feel that your values align with the values of the research environment. And that means it has to be both sides. So what other skills? I would say, as I said, read broadly, go to seminars as broadly as possible, and be ready to challenge yourself. But exact opposite of that advice, which I think is also important to find a balance, is at some point develop enough confidence to do the things. Because if you're always sort of just reading and just think that, oh, I wish I could do that, I wish I could do that, at some point you have to sort of draw the line and say, I think I have enough, and let me now try things as well and make mistakes, and that's okay. Because if you sort of are always sort of in reading, and you should read broadly, but that stops you from acting, then can also sort of just lead to a sense that maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I shouldn't try. So finding that right balance between reading broadly, but also developing your own intellectual framework and doing things, that sense of equilibrium varies.
How did you take from, like, you read a bunch of review paper and literature to frame your own idea, your own framework?
So I think it varies tremendously on the nature of the problem. It's hard. In some areas, there may not be a lot of review papers. So I'll give you an example. When you're looking at antimicrobial resistance in refugee camps, there's not a lot of papers, right? So there's some review, and at some point you have to sort of try things and see what has been done, and sort of evaluate, but also reach out to other people who are working in that. So you have to sort of see, Professor so-and-so has worked on this, let me reach out to them. Be proactive, ask your PI to make that introduction. If you are only going to sort of say that this has already been done and I want to make an increment, at some point you may not be able to do that because it may not be possible financially or time-wise. It's okay to redo some things that other people have done and then sort of develop from that point.
I see. That's very interesting. I have a very interesting situation. So what if like a grad student is they at their fourth year or fifth year really want to graduate, but the PI has like the largest power to whether you can graduate or not. So that power indifference, and then the values start to differentiate a little bit, and then the students feel like maybe that's one of the reasons why grad students feel very anxious, because their PI holds so much power over them, and they feel not very supported, and then they don't know what other resources they can find in this kind of situation. What should a student do?
Well, so this is actually a really good question. I think what the grad students should try to do is to have a clear sense from earlier stages, before the fourth or the fifth year, of what the PI has in mind for them to graduate. So in my lab, people graduate between 4 and 5 years, somewhere in that range, but 5, maybe 5 and a quarter, sometimes 4 and a half, so in that range. But I think that sense that what does it take, what would make a complete thesis, and sort of work towards that, and be mindful of that. At the same time, I think the departments in general have a role to play to make sure that that power imbalance is not abused, right? That the committee meetings are meaningful, that the committee meetings offer insight, and that the committee meetings are able to engage the students and give them a path. And in some ways it goes both ways, that the student also should be proactive in making sure that they are engaging with their PI to understand what the PI wants. It is not to say that the PI is always right, not at all. Sometimes the PI's expectations are incorrect, and then there are ways to resolve that. And we all hope that it doesn't get to that, but if it does get to that, the department should have means to that. But my hope is that that problem becomes less pervasive and doesn't happen often enough if there's a clear sense on what constitutes a good thesis, what has been done, and what is left. And you know, I recognize fully the power that the PIs have and the dynamic, which is unfortunate. In my group, I try to play the role more of an advisor than a boss, right? So historically, this was called PhD advisor, that the person is advising you on your journey as opposed to the boss. And I want to play that role, that I'm able to advise you and I'm able to guide you rather than you are beholden to my wishes. And I don't think I'm perfect. I don't think anybody is perfect, but I really think about that deeply. I tell my students, and again, every lab is different, so I don't want to sort of generalize, but I tell my students, for example, that when their papers or their research becomes mechanical, in other words, when they feel that the next paper is just a small perturbation of the previous one, it's time to graduate, right? Because each paper should offer something new and exciting. It should not be sort of just a mechanical motion of going from one to the other. That just defeats the purpose of the whole thing. But I also recognize that I am at a different stage of my career. I am done with my promotion, so people have different pressures. So I don't want to take that away. But at the same time, I think a culture of understanding, a culture of respect, a culture of recognition of people's efforts is absolutely important.
Got it. Wow, I really like your answer. And then the next question, it's very dear to my heart. International students, I was an international student, you used to be an international student. We experience different cultural barriers and language barriers to different extents.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just small example, like different communication style in Chinese or Asian culture in general, we are more reserved. We prefer to resolve a confrontational argument in private. But in America, we are like more upfront with our ideas, and people are not afraid of confrontation. So how can students more quickly or better adjust or adapt to the academic environment in the States in general?
Yeah, so it's not easy, and I recognize that, and it varies from person to person, region to region, your comfort with a new language, all of that. I think, and I don't know if it is better or worse today. I cannot. I can only talk about my experience, and it is hard. the cultural differences. In some ways, things may be better because of global communication and social media. In some cases, it may be worse. So I think there are new challenges that emerge. My advice to international students is typically one, that they should be they should recognize that they belong here, that they have been admitted not through some kind of a charity, but because of their credentials and their success. So they should have a sense of self-confidence in their abilities. So that's the first thing, because many of us may feel that somehow we are less good, or absolutely, imposter syndrome, or we somehow don't belong. That is something that I think they should recognize is not the case. They don't have to prove themselves extra, even though they may feel that way, but they should know that they are recognized for their excellence, for their abilities, for their ability to contribute. So that's the first thing. Two is the social network plays a huge role. Both social network of people who you are comfortable in your language, in your culture, and also social network of allies who may be from other cultures and other backgrounds, right? So I think making a little bit of an effort in explaining to your friends how you are thinking and letting them explain to you what they are thinking is important. I think this is something that is underappreciated, that we have and universities and labs and departments have a role to play to create an enabling environment so that people don't feel isolated. But I think students, if they have the ability, and I don't want to put it completely on students because institutions have a huge role to play here, is to rely on their social network, get advice from people who've been here in the system for a couple of years, and it's hard to be open with their friends and their colleagues of the challenges. I'll give you a very specific example. So I served on the university committee against sexual harassment and sort of gender-based harassment, and many students who were coming from abroad would not report it, right, for a variety of reasons, right, because they were worried that if they reported it, they might be sent back, or their visa may be revoked. Whether that is true or not is a separate issue, but there is that cultural inhibitions, and this is not from a particular country. Many international students would not report bad behavior until it gets to a point when it's really problematic, not early on, right? So I think that sense, universities have a huge role to play to create an environment, to create resources so that people are comfortable, people who can speak your language from a different culture, people who are appreciative of different religion and different sort of traditions and can understand that. And the third thing I tell people, and it's not always easy, is to find people who are at a different academic stage and appreciate their culture. So, for example, many students who are Muslim would come to me and tell me about their challenges because they knew I was a Muslim, I was from Pakistan, and they could talk to me perhaps much more comfortably. So making an effort of finding role models, if you could, and it doesn't have to be a perfect role model, but somebody who has gone through that stage can navigate that. Again, these are not solutions, because the real solution is an equitable, understanding, respectful environment. And I hope we are moving, or perhaps going towards that. But in the absence of that, one, we should try to make an effort. And what I've told people is, one of the things that I find most meaningful is to paying it forward. As you move through the stages and success and succeed in life, be a mentor to somebody who's just arrived, somebody who may or may not be in your comfort level, somebody who may be struggling. So that I appreciated people who reached out to me when I was early in my career, and sort of moving it forward creates a community and also allows us to be a better person.
You know, I totally agree with you. I feel like asking for help is a strength, and then being vulnerable, being able to speak up, it requires a lot of strength.
Absolutely. It's not easy.
So for you, how do you I certainly also went through the procedure, the process, the period of time. I feel like an outsider. How do you develop that confidence? How do you develop that sense of security, being able to seek for help, seek for resources?
There is no formula, except for the fact that local community can help. So one thing that I tell people is that don't look only in your department. Look in the city and the town if it is possible as well, right? There may be somebody in history department who's doing that. There may be a community organization, a local church, a local NGO where you might find people who can guide you. Somebody who works in a local company, somebody who is a manager at a grocery store, whatever. Try to sort of be broad in your skills, and blaming yourself is often the first thing that we do, but in my opinion that should be the last thing that we do, if at all. I think there are very legitimate reasons by which people feel a sense of insecurity because the system is not providing that security for them, and it's easier said than done. But I think it's on people like me and you to provide people with that sense of belonging. You know, I mean, I was part of a workshop that said that even the word inclusion is not very good because there's a power dynamic, because it says I include you, but rather what the word should be belonging, that you belong here. Whether or not I include you or not is irrelevant. You belong. Right, so think of this as you've gotten admission, you have come here, you belong here. You are just as important member of the academic and intellectual community as anybody else. And that sense, and you don't have to sort of really be overconfident or sort of really feel that you are better than others. You just have to feel that you belong here, and with a sense of belonging and a sense of sort of humility.
That's awesome.